So, all right, in tonight's session, we are going to be talking about access threats and vulnerability. Go to our training folder. You are going to see this is the website Cybersecurity, and you will see the course materials. So inside the course material, this is a very new topic. I've uploaded access threats and vulnerability, and I'm releasing the information gradually one after the other. Right, so I've actually I only included the module 1 for now. I didn't want to fill up the whole folder with information. For now, we are going to be tackling the module 1, and after that, I will now upload the module 2. The exercises and the quizzes are all available. Now, if you open the module 1, we are going to see, I think I've added the module 1 images, and then a lot of information are here. So let us get started. In the next few minutes, we are going to be done with the introduction. Today is basically going to be introduction. I'm going to be introducing access threats and vulnerability as a course, and this is in preparation for certification examination. You must be able to at least get one certification from ISC2, which is International Information System Security Certification Consortium, ISC2. You must at least grab one certification from them, and they have a lot of courses available. You can even start with the entry level, which is the CC, Certified in Cybersecurity, before you go into the CISSP, Certified Information System Security Professional, and all these things are professional certification by ISC2 that you can grab. And in each of these certification, understanding access threats and vulnerability, understanding risks, threats and vulnerability, understanding threat actors, understanding asset classification, asset management, these are integral components of this examination. You cannot just go to an exam like CC without getting prepared. You must read, you must study. And the topic we are studying right now, the topic we are talking about right now, is part of what you must do, what you must learn if you must excel in this type of professional certification examination. That's not all. You should also endeavor to obtain one certification from Cisco. Cisco has a number of certifications, cybersecurity certification. Now, the essence of this certification is just to prove to employers that if you can sit down and read and pass this examination, because of how the integrity of this examination have been maintained over the years, it actually shows that you are a disciplined person, you are a smart person. You can sit down, you can study and understand difficult concepts and write exams and pass. That is the essence of this certification. You must get one from Cisco, get one from ISC2, and probably grab one from CompShare. Alright, let me show you some options that CompShare has available that you can as well grab. Alright, you can come to CompShare and obtain either the CompShare A+, or Network Plus, or Security Plus, or CISA, Pentest Plus, Security X. These are a lot of certification. And in this field of cybersecurity, it is a field that keeps on evolving, a field that will keep on challenging you. Right? So our goal is, all we are studying, just we are gathering information, we are learning, so that you can be able to take up some of these certification examinations and the pass, add it to your CV, blow your trumpet, let employers know that yes, you studied, you sat, and you passed. And for you to pass means that something changed in you. You actually learned a whole lot of things. And these ones are I've shown you some of this one from Cisco, CCNA. Right, these are different Cisco certifications, which of course my goal is to make sure you gather enough knowledge under my mentorship, so that in the future you can be able to sit for these examinations and of course pass. That's enough for the introduction. So I just want to show you what is possible. I've taken some of these examinations and I've passed, and that is what has given me the authority to be able to speak the way I'm speaking about cybersecurity. And when you take this examination, confidence and experience comes from it. Right? So now, opening the access threats and vulnerability course, I want to start. I think I just have 4 slides. I just prepared 4 slides because today we are not going to go deep. In access threats and vulnerability, we are going to look at access classification, we are going to look at asset management, we are going to be looking at encryption, decryption, hashing, digital certificate creation, and all the rest practically. These are the things we are going to be doing when we get to the other modules of the course. But today, which is module 1, we are just going to be looking at introduction, and I think I'm going to take this in gradually. Once you watch this video again, right, you can at least take notes, and remember, these images I created, I've already uploaded them into the module 1 images folder. They are all there. So now, as a beginner, what is asset? You already know what an asset is. I think before that, we should go through this module first, because we want to understand the concept of risk, the concept of asset, the concept of threat, and the concept of vulnerability. I hope you know, right? All of us know that the reason why cybersecurity exists, the reason why cybersecurity is one of the most highly sought after tech courses right now, is because of threats and vulnerability. Threats are emerging every day. Threats are increasing their technique, they are modifying their ways, right? And then vulnerability is always there. And since you have vulnerabilities that can be exploited by threats, cybersecurity professionals are needed, and they will continue to be needed. This is a field where you cannot run out of opportunity, because threat actors are increasing. As far as you have human beings on earth, and you have organizations functioning, and you have organizations collecting sensitive information and storing them in the cloud or storing them somewhere else electronically, there will always be vulnerability, and threat actors will always try to exploit them. And because of that, we will always be highly sought after. And so these are the type of thing that if you check properly, you will just give all your best in cybersecurity, because opportunity can never be exhausted. It is inexhaustible. Right now, we want to look at the concept of risk, and of course, what is risk? I broke these things down to the level that even a newbie that is in JSO1 can understand that anything that has the ability to impact the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of an asset is a risk. Now, let me say it again. We know that our major goal in cybersecurity, I used to tell myself, what is the aim of cybersecurity? It is CIA. That is the aim of cybersecurity. The summary of, if you like to speak all the grammar in this word, right? At the end, why are we here in this field of cybersecurity? It is just to maintain the confidentiality, the availability, and the integrity of information, or of assets, or of data. Information is an asset, data is an asset. So asset is anything that is of value, anything that is valuable to the organization is what we call an asset. So now, risk is now anything or any situation that can impact the confidentiality, right? Anything that can impact the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of an asset is what we call risk. Now, another way to look at this is this. Even if only the confidentiality is impacted, that is a risk. It could only be the integrity or availability. Now, these whole things are interwoven to the extent that 3 of them are important. You cannot tell me that you're a cybersecurity professional, at least I tried now, I maintained the confidentiality, just that the integrity had an issue. Then you failed completely. So both confidentiality, integrity, and availability of an asset must be maintained for our goal in cybersecurity to be fulfilled. And so anything that has that ability to impact the CIA of an asset, and of course, asset is anything that is valuable to an organization. There is no simpler way to explain risk than this. And the second term and concept here is threat. Now, without threat, right, there will be no need of us studying cybersecurity. And threat has been there since the origin of man, right? Threat has been there. It is fundamental to men or to man. The day that Adam and Eve existed on earth, that is where threat started existing. And what is even happening now is that the ways that threat actors operate is now becoming more sophisticated with the advance of technology. So any circumstance, any event, any person, anything that can negatively impact assets is what we call a threat. Alright, so I have a course. We are going to be going deeper where we'll be looking at different threat actors. Alright, but for now, just know what a threat is. And threats are everywhere. Look at your right, you see threat. Look at your left, you see threat. Look at every organization, especially those of you that are collecting people's sensitive information and storing, right? So threats will always be there. Now, the third concept here, of course, is vulnerability. Now, what is a vulnerability? It is a weakness that can be exploited by a threat. A weakness. Some of my students will say that they prefer to call this vulnerability a loophole. Right? It is a loophole. It is something that is that can be exploited. A loophole, a weakness. That is what we call vulnerability. And this weakness can actually be of different categories. Right? We have different categories of this weakness. We can look at it here. We have the technical vulnerability and the human vulnerability. But before we go there, at least we've seen how risk, threats, and vulnerability are interwoven. We've seen how access, threats, and vulnerability are interwoven. I said asset, anything that has value. And that asset is what attracts, it's just like the sugar that attracts ants. Right? If there is no asset, the threat actor will have no need of wasting his or her resources trying to attack something that is not valuable. And so because there's something that is valuable, that is why the threat actors are after it. Right? So the threat actors are after our assets. But for them to get access to those assets, there must be a vulnerability. It could be human vulnerability, it could be technical vulnerability. And they will do every way possible to be able to exploit those vulnerabilities, especially when they are exploitable, so that they will gain access to our assets, which could be money, which could be data, right, and all the rest. We're going to be looking at that gradually, and I believe time is going to permit us. Right. So now, risk, security risk. This is this slide number 4. Okay, that's the third slide here. Security risk. To get risk, we're going to see likelihood. Likelihood times impact is what we call risk. We calculate risk in this field of cybersecurity in order to help us prevent costly and disruptive events. And we also do this in order to identify improvements that can be made to systems and processes, and to determine which risk can be tolerated and prioritize critical assets that require attention. Now, why this is very important is because we are going to look at asset classification and asset management. Now, all risk, all assets are not the same. Right? We need to prioritize the critical assets that require more attention. Some assets need more attention than the other. So with this, now I can be able to calculate and then understand the assets that are very important that we need to pay more attention to, and the assets that we should, of course, pay little attention to, because of course you know that organization is running with limited resources, and we need to prioritize and allocate these resources to assets that are very critical, that require strict management and attention. So now look at risk factors. Now, cybersecurity is very broad, and even though it is broad, we just have two major risk factors. Right? Two major risk factors, which are always threats and vulnerability. These two young men here, threats and vulnerability, they are the two major risk factors. Mention list of 1 million risk factors. We can still classify them under threats and vulnerability. Now let us talk about vulnerability first of all. Vulnerability can be grouped into two. Right? We have the technical vulnerability and we have the human vulnerability. I was talking with some of my students today, and I told them that threat actors are dangerous, but they are not as dangerous as we think they are, if not because of this human vulnerability. Let me say it again. Human vulnerability, through the process called social engineering, has resulted to 99.9% of all successful attacks. I have not seen a successful attack that took place without human error, that took place without exploitation of human being and the exploitation of human psychology. Right? And this technical part, there is also technical vulnerability, but it is rare. Right? It is rare because most technical vulnerability still needs human error for such to actually occur. Now, what is the example of technical vulnerability? A technical vulnerability can be a misconfigured software that might give an unauthorized person access to important data. That is just what we call technical vulnerability. It could be unpatched software, an outdated software, a weak password. Right, so all those technical issues, misconfigured software, there's error in the misconfiguration, and then a threat actor exploited that error and gained access to critical data and information. Where human vulnerability could also occur as a result of error, right, by a human being. A forgetful employee can actually lose their access card in the parking lot, and when this access card enters into the hand of a threat actor, you know the crazy thing they can do with it. Now, talking about categories of threats, right, you have an intentional threat and an unintentional threat. Now, what's an example of an intentional threat? An intentional threat might be a malicious hacker who gains access to the sensitive information by targeting a misconfigured software or misconfigured application. That's an intentional threat. While an unintentional threat could also be an employee that holds the door open for an unknown person and automatically grants the person access to a restricted area. That's an unintentional threat. You see how human beings still play a role, right, in each of these things occurring. So that is it about that. If you check this slide, I think everything is very explanatory. And if you go to the folder, you see some files and documents you can read in order to have deeper insight on those things, right? So let me just be faster here because I don't even have much time. If you check here, we'll be talking about common classification requirements. Since we came to the conclusion that access is anything that has value and this access needs to be protected, we need to protect it. We need to maintain the confidentiality of that asset, the availability and the integrity. This is what our goal is. So now we use different techniques like asset management and asset classification to know the assets and track them, right? And also understand the risks that affect them. Without this, you won't be able to know the assets to protect. You won't be able to know the categories of assets that you have. You won't be able to even know how delicate or sensitive these assets are, because assets are not equal in terms of the type of risks that affect them and also how sensitive they are. And so the idea behind this process of asset management is simple. You can only protect what you know you have. And so that's why asset management, that's a domain in the CISSP age security domain that has to do with what? Identity and access management. I think these guys are okay. There's also another domain, which is domain 2, which is asset security. So they're in charge of classifying assets, managing assets, and making sure that the assets that need to be protected are actually prioritized. So we have asset classification, which is the practice of labeling assets based on sensitivity and importance to the organization. This is where the cybersecurity professional, which is an asset manager, will be asking questions like, what do we have, where it is, who owns it, and how important is it? When we gather this information, we can be able to, of course, classify the assets properly. If you check here, you see that organizations protect a variety of different assets, and some of them might include, you have digital assets, you have information system, which are also assets like data, right? You have physical assets that include facilities. You have intangible assets like brand reputation and or intellectual property. So different assets, and each of these assets, depending on the type of organization, have different levels of priority that should be given to them. Digital assets, information system, physical assets, and tangible and intangible assets. Now we have different asset classification depending on the organization. There is restricted asset, there's confidential assets, there's internal only, and there's public assets. Now the lowest level of classification is public assets. These ones are available to the public, and the assets here has no negative consequence to the organization if they are released. But internal, so it increases with this. Look at how it increases from public to internal to confidential, and confidential to restricted. Restricted is the highest level. This category is reserved for incredibly sensitive assets that are very, very sensitive. They belong to this need to know information classification. They need to know, right? You release them on the need to know basis, right? And that is it about that. So let me quickly go over to the next slide. Of course, we've looked at risk, threats, and vulnerability. This is class security. I will not waste too much time on this because, of course, we know that this is 2026 and a lot of organizations are now going or migrating to the cloud. As we see how easy it is now to own a business online. You can run your business without even having any of the softwares or the platform in your premise. You can run all of them by hosting them in the cloud. So we have an organization we call the cloud service providers. This organization, they have the resources, they have the tools, they have the technique, they have the financial resources to generate data in a very big quantity. And generate all these softwares, platform. In fact, they generate a lot of services in very big quantity, and they can sell these services to other smaller organizations that cannot afford to actually run them like this, right? We call them the cloud service providers, and the type of service they provide are grouped into three. There is software as a service, there is platform as a service, and they also render infrastructure as a service. So example of infrastructure as a service is Microsoft Azure. In fact, Microsoft, Google, and Amazon, these are cloud service providers, and they provide some of these services to organizations. So Microsoft Azure, Amazon EC2, and Google Compute Engine. This is an example of infrastructure as a service. While platform as a service, it refers to the back-end application development tools that clients can access online, like Google App Engine platform, Heroku, and VMware Cloud Foundry. These are examples of platform as a service. Now, software as a service is very common. Of course, most of you have used Zoom, you've used Slack, you've used some of these Gmail email services. They are all examples of software as a service. Now that organizations are now migrating to the cloud, it actually poses a lot of challenges. It's like misconfiguration, like cloud native breaches can occur. I've talked about the on-chain attack, where these cloud service providers can be attacked. Threat actors are now looking into the cloud because they know it is where data is. That is where threat actors are attracted to. If you are migrating data and access to the cloud, then there is need for cloud security. So monitoring access might be difficult depending on the client and the level of service. Meeting regulatory standard is also concerned, particularly in industries that require the law. Especially about this regulation like HIPAA, PCI DSS, and then GDPR. So these are a lot of challenges that cloud security actually provide. Now, of course, there is this principle of shared responsibility, where now a cloud service provider customer, CSP customer, an organization using the services of these CSPs, they have this shared responsibility. There's responsibility available for the customer and the responsibility that is meant for the CSP, which is the cloud service providers. Like identity and access management, resource configuration, and data handling is the responsibility of the customer or the clients. They are commonly responsible for securing something that is directly within their control, while the other aspects of the security that is not within their control is now left in the hand of the cloud service providers. So I think that is it about that. We'll talk about framework. I think I'm going to be talking about the NIST cybersecurity framework later, because now for organizations to be able to maintain the confidentiality, the availability, and the integrity of information, and also to raise their security posture, increase the standard of their security posture, they actually need to implement this cybersecurity framework. And the NIST is the best to do the job. I think this NIST, they originally released this NIST cybersecurity framework in the year 2014. They were the one that developed the cybersecurity framework. I think NIST is part of United States cybersecurity organization, and they are in charge of their goal. Actually, is to make the framework more flexible and making it easier for small businesses and organizations to be able to adopt, especially those that lack the resources to develop their own security plan. You can make use of the NIST cybersecurity framework, make use of the NIST plan, and then modify it to actually suit the goal and the need of your organization. So this NIST framework actually has three major areas, which is the core, It has the core, it has the tier, and the profile. Now the core has to do with these three major functions to identify, protect, detect, and actually respond and recover information. You need to identify, you need to protect, you need to detect threats, and then respond properly when there is any threat, any incidents, and then recover data or information when they are stolen. So these are just the major core. And then when it comes to the tier of the of the NIST CSF, this tier are measured, I think is measured from 1 to 4, and tier 1 is the least. This is what we use to measure your security posture, to know how standard or how strong your security posture is. Let me show you something here. The CSF tiers are measured on a scale of 1 to 4, and tier 1 is the lowest score. Alright, just imagine if they checked your security posture, checked everything, your infrastructure, and at least you met, you fail or you fall under tier 4, and that shows that the organization's security posture is also improving and is very, very strong. Alright, so that is just it about that. So the final component of this CSF, which is the cybersecurity framework, is the profile. The profile are tailored to address the specific risk of an organization or industry. In fact, this profile is just like the baseline. Right? They are used to actually help organizations develop a baseline for their cybersecurity plan, or as a way of comparing their current security posture to a specific industry standard. So it's from your profile, right? You can be able to know the level you are, the stage where you are, what needs to be improved when we compare it to the specific industry standard. Alright, so that is it about that. Remember, the topic is access, threats, and vulnerability. We looked at asset classification, look at asset classification and asset management. We looked at what an asset is. We've seen different types of assets that need to be protected. Alright, we saw that we have digital assets, we have information system, we have physical assets and all the rest, and then common classification, common asset classification that we have: restricted, confidential, internal only, and all the rest. So in our next classes, we start looking at hands-on training using some of these tools, because now you know that data has a life cycle. All right, you have life cycle of data. This data, at every cycle of data, we need to protect it. That's why we'll be looking at hashing, encryption, digital certificates, and all the rest. So see you guys in the next class. I'm going to upload the video, and then you will watch and keep on learning. Remember what the goal is. You must get and bang one professional certification examination at least before this year runs out.